I've said this before, I will likely say it again, but when it comes to the Gospel of John, it seems as though Jesus kind of floats 6 feet above all the rest of us throughout the entire Gospel. He is really portrayed as someone who is incredibly wise, divinely wise. And when it comes to those folks who enter into dialogue with him or verbal conflict, there are usually 1 or 2 ways in which they respond. First way is with anger and frustration, and at the end of those stories, those people are often searching for rocks to stone him. The other way is with open-mouthed astonishment, and you can just sort of see their mouths opening and closing like fish as they try to get their minds around the truth of what Jesus has just said. And the disciples. The disciples are like newly hatched goslings imprinted on Jesus, never getting further away than a wingspan, always under his protection, always clustered around him. And the lesson for last week, which was the parable of the vine, is typical Jesus talk in John. It creates sort of this hierarchy of being and of relationship with God at the top, and then Jesus, and then his followers and disciples. As God is the vine dresser, Jesus is the vine, and the disciples are the branches that bear fruit. It's almost a trickle-down divinity, a trickle-down theology of God and divinity and power and understanding flowing from the top through Jesus to us. And that's what makes this text that follows immediately after the parable of the vine so extraordinary. Because Jesus relaxes that imagery for a moment and embraces the disciples not as servants but as friends. All of a sudden, this unapproachable 6 feet above us Jesus comes down to our human level. And all of a sudden, the relationship between teacher and student, between master and servant is flattened, and a band of brothers is created, a new kind of community where Jesus begins to talk to the disciples in qualitatively different ways. And then he drops the bombshell. Those who really love their friends lay down their lives for their sake. And we know what John is doing. I mean, this is a text that comes just before Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. But what John is doing in commenting on the crucifixion this way is he's making an extraordinary statement about the cross. One that we tend to overlook with our creeds and confessions and 2,000 years of theology. That Jesus' death was simply a friend acting on behalf of other friends. It was a simple act of friendship, which I think throws the cross in a whole new light. And then there's the layer that John speaks to his own community that he's writing this for. A community that is beleaguered, a community that is oppressed, a community that is persecuted, a community that is having a great deal of difficulty making ends meet, that is barely surviving and hanging on by its fingernails. And he says to them, friends, lay down their lives for their friends. That friends aren't for your benefit. Friends aren't for your leverage. You lay down your life for your friends. One of the things that I find extraordinary about this congregation in particular, out of all the other congregations that I have served, is the level of friendship that I see in it. When we gather at community dinners or other fellowship opportunities, I often sit back and watch, and I am amazed at people who are approaching their 90s, sitting companionably with each other, with people they have known since kindergarten or before. And there is a great deal of peace and contentment between these people. And I have seen this close-knit community open its doors wide and embrace people who are new to the community with just that same peaceable intensity. If you can imagine those two things opposite complement of each other. Embracing people and extending true friendship. It is an extraordinary quality of this community. But we know the reality in which we live. We know the reality that's no less than 30 miles north and west of here, where the world is a very different place, where people live with antagonism and self-centeredness, where people push each other away, where people live in competition with each other because times are tough and jobs are scarce and opportunities are even scarcer. We know that world, and we know that as the economy recovers and building starts up again in our county, that world is coming to us. And we're going to find ourselves in confrontation with it. Two different ways of being human and living with each other. How shall we encounter that world when it comes? What will be our church's response? Will we be able to continue the level of friendship that we now express and enjoy, or will we too become more fragmented and compartmentalized in our life, and will our friendship begin to disintegrate? The gospel command is clear. Extend friendship. And I think there are three things primarily in this text that mark the friends of Jesus, maybe markers by which we should live our congregational life and bear with us as the times change around us. And the first is, you don't choose your friends. You are chosen by Jesus. And as a friend of Jesus, you are to befriend any and all within your sphere of awareness who have need. And that's what it means to be a friend, to see the need of the other and to embrace them. And you are to live with them or live towards them with this characteristic that the Bible calls agape, that Greek word for love that gets translated into English. But it's a love that is not self-centered. It is a love that does not seek our own welfare first, but looks to the needs of the other and seeks to meet them. And these things we all well know. They're imprinted all over the gospel stories in all four gospels, epitomized in the parable of the Good Samaritan, of course. But there is a third thing that is not often mentioned that I think is utterly critical. And that is the friends of Jesus do not form an elite group and then look down on other people because of their status of being friends of Jesus. And this is something I am acutely aware of. Some of you know that I grew up in Europe. A few of you know the kind of situation that I grew up in England. How many of you watched Downton Abbey? Okay, not so many. Those of you who do, that's where I grew up. And Downton Abbey is a program that I have a great deal of difficulty kind of watching, because it describes a family in the extreme upper classes. It then goes downstairs to the servants that serve that family, and then look outside of that family to the world outside. And there's one dynamic there in that series that I saw time and time and time again living out. And that is that the servants of the upper class take on the airs and the authority and the elitism of the upper class and begin to project that out on other people as though they were the upper class. And they begin to treat others with condemnation and with disdain. That is wrong. That is not the kind of friendship that the friends of Jesus are called to. But so often we see that in the church. We are God's people. We are above it all. The irony and the paradox that is inherent in this lesson today is that to become a friend of Jesus, to be lifted up to that level of Jesus, is paradoxically to go down on your knees in service. Not to look at others with disdain, but to look at them with embrace. Not to look at other people as though they are unfortunate, but to see people who are unfortunate as opportunity to show divine service. And if the lesson of the gospel is true, it is that kind of friendship that stoops to conquer that will end up saving the world. So maybe one of the great questions that comes out of this text this morning is, how shall we, when we know what is coming to us in terms of a culture shift, stoop to conquer in order to save the world that we have been called to serve? How shall we be friends of Jesus? How shall we serve?
I just want to take 2 minutes of your time to tell you about something that is better than sliced bread. That is electronic giving. I've been signed up for this program for over 2 years. And last year, when I broke my hip and I was out of commission for 6 weeks, it was a comfort to me to know that my contributions to church continue. Now, there are a lot of reasons that we cannot come to church. Some of us are on vacation. Some of us have business to take care of. Some of us have a hangover. But whatever the reason may be that you cannot come to church, please be assured that your contribution is still valid. To pay the pastor, to pay the staff, to turn on the lights, to keep the air conditioned. So I hope that all of you will take the opportunity to fill out this form. Linda has it in the office. It's very simple, and have your contribution taken out of your bank account. Thank you very much.
While Doris is coming down, I invite all those who are present who are graduating this year, either from high school or from some form of higher education, to come forward to be recognized. We do have a gift for you, so you can only get it if you come forward. Yeah, the gifts do it every time. And you can stand up here on the stairs facing the congregation.